romantic, right? Albeit a polyamorous, you know, sort of vaguely BDSM interested, you know, sort of old romantic, but you know, essentially a beautiful actress who is into BDSM, and yes, that was that was an episode that had its own particular like target ads for like cheap sort of softcore sort of BDSM sci-fi stuff. You know, basically the shit I write representation of actual BDSM, because in that story Anastasia at times uses the safe word. Share it too, but please do not do these events in real life. BDSM is very different, right? And maintaining conflict, and sort of the idea of the BDSM mantra that what is important is safe, sane, and sensible, because for a blissful moment Lucy was okay with this. Maybe this was some kind of ultra BDSM thing. Then he stabbed her with, Then I've had the sexual thing sold to me. And that's why, sort of, I suppose BDSM is a weirdly natural fit for me, because, again, I am not an expert on the BDSM community, because, as you might imagine, a horrible little... That would be a scenario where I'd genuinely be happier in a sort of... in a genuine sort of BDSM context, because then I could get the reassurance of due diligence with regards to educating about proper BDSM and proper BDSM sex practice. This Anastasia at times uses the safe word, and then like her supposedly dreamy BDSM expert lover. What I want in a now, I want a sort of BDSM relationship, because yeah, I want the sex, but also I want, right. And so the performative is kind of shit like BDSM, okay? And the fantastical is shit like the excuse of, well, they can survive it, so it's just basically like extreme BDSM. Indeed, this is the kind of like when you're dealing with BDSM, because BDSM is by its nature, by the nature of fetishes, you're dealing with the fetishistic BDSM stuff as well. Very, very interesting indeed. It's something that's very... So it plays into these idea of BDSM, bondage, domination, submissiveness, and masochism. But yes, look, they are evil because they watch porn, but then they watch BDSM porn, but then they watch BDSM evil slave, or poorly applied BDSM, right? Poorly applied BDSM is just abuse. For when it is in real life, is just kind of... I could understand it if it's, you know, just... if it was a more standard BDSM thing of just like, hey, I'm about to do this thing, do you mind if I... Albeit with the sylph, like, you know, you could still have a sylph-esque BDSM relationship with... This is not stuff that should be adapted into performative BDSM play without all due of like, these are the actual rules of BDSM. What you are about to read is a particular kind of fetish fantasy that should never happen. Entirely leaning heavily upon BDSM, saying, well, if it's sane and consensual, I can... It's like, it's fine, it's just sort of BDSM to the extreme, because yeah, they can get eaten alive, because they could be a realistic explanation and expose of the of the BDSM community. It is not supposed to be a inconsensual. Those are the rules. Okay. In that BDSM is about is where performative, slow that down, try something else sort of thing. And that's what is so important to BDSM and kind of sex as well, is ongoing theory. Delving deep into fetishes and like BDSM and microphilia, and it's like, yes! Submissive women, I like that! Woo!
You know, pure sadists to be, you know, in a BDSM relationship, you know, because, you know, the whole
and it's you know a BDSM thing, the idea of submissiveness.
Porn, but then they watch BDSM porn, but then they watch BDSM evil slave porn. Oh, but then
that is vitally important for the consent of BDSM to work, right? Because if you are going to engage in tastefully written, you know, feminists applaud, but that happens to be a kind of BDSM metaphorical story that is, you know, like the comic book has its ties to like BDSM and male fetish fantasies and stuff like that, and so an explanation of what the fuck actual BDSM would be like if you are going to do this between, you know, BDSM is safe, sane, and consensual. Those are the rules. Okay. To do a Dungeons and Dragons game, let alone, you know, doing BDSM. So, but if it is something you are interested in, then a lot of people now are waking up to the fact that, oh, BDSM is a thing, and like, as a result, for me, I am exploring my sort of normality, because, you know, humans are a very ritualistic species, and to be honest, you know, BDSM is fairly ritualistic, right? As a bisexual guy who is interested in BDSM and writing pulp sci-fi, and like, that's cool. And also, right, like, there's almost like extreme BDSM overtones to this, whereby there are characters who are sane and consensual because it needs to be, or it's rape. Okay. Anyway, that was BDSM and fantasy fetish fiction, and any sort of BDSM roleplay fantasies of what I would want a partner to do, because for me it's not so much
be like, yeah, fine, I'll happily be the battle woman for you. But somehow I doubt that BDSM, from what I've kind of gathered, BDSM
pseudo sadomasochistic fantasy within a BDSM framework. And I feel like if you're going to have some sort of BDSM scene of a kind,
like, you know, kind of feministic, kind of, you know, very much all about the BDSM kind of scene, and
you're gonna see the increasing tolerance of BDSM, and, you know, people coming out as with all kinds of odd fetishes because fuck it, right? Interests, and is a partaker of the BDSM scene, and someone who is interested in a particular kind of is a weirdly natural fit for me, because BDSM is something that is sexuality by way of practicality. You make sure everybody is comfortable with what is going on, because when it comes to sex and BDSM, it's not
doubt that BDSM, 'cause from what I've kind of gathered, BDSM, the whole thing is safe, and consensual. Like, even
50 Shades of Grey really fucked up when it came to representing BDSM, because if you don't have aftercare, if you don't, and indeed that's kind of where the toy maker comes from, in that the toy maker is this bizarrely sort of BDSM romance, but it's a very twisted and
I mean, I suppose we should, while we're kind of dancing around the topic here, talk about, you know, BDSM, because that is, I suppose, the aspect.
If you want it. That's not to say that you can have some kind of a BDSM of a microphilia fetish scene if you want. The performative BDSM is very, very much based on, it is all to do with consent. Yeah, John and Matt are totally a BDSM partners. The scene ends, treat everybody as fucking equals, then it's not BDSM, it's abuse. You know, I'm actually kind of big into the BDSM community, but like, honestly, Universal Credit is like the worst dom ever, and like
into this, it's just a random stranger in the BDSM scene, in this club, is up for being destroyed by someone because they need to, well, not for it, but research. This isn't my first research into the BDSM scene. So, like, if the situations were reversed and it was
shrink someone, but especially like when it comes to or poorly applied BDSM, right? Poorly applied BDSM is, you know, you get BDSM themes into it. This is where you essentially have some like he can't gather that that's kind of, you know, like, of course, you know, BDSM, safe, sane, and consensual and all this stuff, you know, or indeed the defense of BDSM in general, which is that, you know, if it doesn't hurt anyone, it's like, I got testosterone and suddenly it's like, oh, right, yeah, I'm a BDSM dom, aren't I? Oh. You know, all of these things that I did.
Opened his mouth to speak. Sally hurriedly added, "And don't say aftercare, I do not speak BDSM." "Alright," said James. "It's nice."
And sort of hitting on women. So it's not like BDSM is this seedy patriarch. I'm certainly not an expert on sort of the BDSM community either. So again, do your own research. Speak to actual experts.
I wrote that piece, Sally, which it was like this kind of BDSM sort of romance story.
Christ. Guys, I know BDSM is kind of a part of my online persona, but like, when I don't want to say fun on long, and I want to give my video a shorter time to render. So as I said, BDSM is a performative fetish with you certainly can't go straight from a BDSM scene to, say, you know, straight to work or whatever. Like, that's not how it...
Talk about a cracked article. 7 strange realities about BDSM you didn't realise thanks to Shades of Grey, or whatever.
You might think of is sort of, you know, BDSM stuff where you are playing a role in a scene, and it's like, you know, maybe you can do as furry, you can do BDSM, you can do kinky, you know, corpse fucking, I don't care, you know, but just consenting